July 1944. The hedgerows of Normandy. A German Tiger tank commander peers through his optics at the American advance, and he's counting. 1 Sherman, 2, 5, 10, 15 Shermans rolling toward his position. He speaks calmly into his radio, almost bored. More targets. To him, this isn't a threat. It's target practice. The Tiger I was a monster. 60 tons of steel and fury, armed with a legendary 88mm gun that could punch through a Sherman's armor from over a mile away. The American M4 Sherman, by contrast, weighed 30 tons and carried a 75mm gun that struggled to penetrate a Tiger's frontal armor even at point-blank range. The mathematics of tank warfare seemed brutally simple. One Tiger could destroy 5, 10, even 15 Shermans before they got close enough to matter. German tank crews had earned the right to their confidence. In North Africa, a single Tiger battalion had destroyed over 500 Allied tanks. At Kursk, Tiger companies held off entire Soviet tank corps. When a Tiger appeared on the battlefield, Allied tankers radioed warnings with genuine fear in their voices. Tiger Front meant men were about to die, and there was little anyone could do about it. American tank crews knew the odds. They called the Sherman the Ronson, after the cigarette lighter that advertised, "Lights first time, every time." A dark joke about how quickly Shermans burst into flames when hit. British crews had an even grimmer name, Tommy Cooker. The Sherman's gasoline engine and ammunition storage made it a death trap when German shells penetrated. Crew survival rates told the story. A Sherman crew that took a penetrating hit had seconds to escape before flames consumed the interior. But here's what the German tank commanders didn't understand in the summer of 1944. Here's what their battlefield arrogance prevented them from seeing. The Americans weren't trying to fight fair. They weren't planning to trade shot for shot with German armor. They were planning something else entirely. Something that would transform the Sherman from a liability into the weapon that broke the Wehrmacht's armored spine in Western Europe. This is the story of how American tank doctrine evolved under fire. How tactical innovation defeated technological superiority. How the U.S. Army turned the Sherman's greatest weakness, its need for numerical superiority, into an operational advantage that German commanders couldn't counter. It's a story about adaptation, combined arms warfare, and the cold mathematical reality that 5 coordinated Shermans could kill 1 Tiger before it destroyed them all. The transformation didn't happen overnight. It was written in blood across French fields and Belgian forests. It was learned by Sherman crews who watched their friends burn and lived long enough to figure out what worked. And it represented something the Germans had failed to anticipate, that American industrial might wasn't just about building more tanks. It was about building enough tanks that tactical losses became operationally acceptable, that crews could learn, adapt, and perfect killing techniques that turned German technical superiority into a fatal disadvantage. The problem was stark, and it was killing American tankers at an alarming rate. In June and July of 1944, U.S. armored divisions were taking catastrophic casualties in Normandy's Bocage country. The Sherman's technical inferiority wasn't just a disadvantage. In the wrong tactical situation, it was a death sentence. Lieutenant Belton Cooper, an ordnance officer with the 3rd Armored Division, documented the carnage in his maintenance logs. His repair crews were pulling burned bodies from destroyed Shermans every day. Sometimes they found crews who'd made it halfway out of the turret before the flames caught them. Other times, the tanks were so thoroughly incinerated that identification was impossible. Cooper wrote that in some engagements, his division lost 50% of its tank strength in a matter of hours. The technical disparity was real and measurable. The Tiger I's 88mm KWK-36 gun could penetrate a Sherman's frontal armor at ranges exceeding 1,800 meters. The Sherman's standard 75mm M3 gun needed to close to within 500 meters, and even then, It could only reliably penetrate the Tiger's side or rear armor. Frontal attacks were essentially suicide. The Sherman's maximum frontal armor was just 76 millimeters at a 60-degree angle. The Tiger's frontal armor was 100 millimeters of vertical steel, twice as thick and more effectively angled. But the disparity went beyond just armor and guns. The Tiger's Maybach engine produced 700 horsepower. It had wide tracks that distributed its weight efficiently. Its optical rangefinders were superior. Its crew had better training in gunnery and tactics. German tank commanders averaged 18 months of training before seeing combat. American tankers were lucky to get 6 months. Many replacement crews arrived in Normandy with less than 12 weeks of training total. Staff Sergeant Lafayette Poole understood the problem intimately. He commanded a Sherman in the 3rd Armored Division, a man who would eventually become one of the most lethal tank commanders in American history. But in July 1944, Poole was still figuring out how to keep his crew alive against technically superior German armor. He'd already lost friends. He'd seen Tigers demolish entire tank platoons. And he'd learned that the tactics taught in training, advance, identify target, engage, were a recipe for death in actual combat. The hedgerow terrain made everything worse. Normandy's bocage country was a defender's paradise. Ancient earthen walls lined with thick vegetation, creating natural fortifications every 100 meters. Fields were small, visibility was limited, and ambush sites were everywhere. German tank commanders could position their Tigers in concealed positions, covering approach routes with clear fields of fire. They could wait until American armor was at point-blank range, then destroy 3 or 4 Shermans before the Americans even located the threat. American armor commanders faced a brutal calculus. They had objectives to take. They had infantry to support. They had breakthrough operations to execute. And they had tanks that were demonstrably inferior to German armor in direct engagements. Something had to change, or the casualty rates would become operationally unsustainable. The U.S. Army tried several solutions. They rushed the M4A3E2 Jumbo Sherman into production, a heavily armored variant that could absorb punishment better but was too slow and too rare to make a strategic difference. They deployed the M26 Pershing, a true heavy tank that could fight German armor on equal terms, but it didn't arrive in meaningful numbers until the war's final months. They experimented with improvised armor, welding salvaged steel plates onto Sherman hulls, but this added weight without adding mobility. The real solution came not from engineering or industry, but from doctrine. From tankers who survived long enough to understand what worked. From officers who paid attention to after-action reports and were willing to discard pre-war assumptions. The answer was tactical, not technological, and it required American tank crews to think about armored warfare in a fundamentally different way. Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Abrams, who would later become Army Chief of Staff, was already implementing the new doctrine with his 37th Tank Battalion in the summer of 1944. Abrams understood that the Sherman's advantages weren't in armor or firepower. They were in numbers, mobility, and crew survivability. If you lost a Sherman, you could replace it within hours. If you lost a Tiger, it might be months before a replacement arrived, if ever. Abrams trained his crews to exploit that advantage ruthlessly. The doctrine that emerged was brutal in its simplicity and devastating in its execution. It was called swarming or wolf pack tactics, though tankers had cruder names for it. The principle was this: never fight a Tiger one-on-one. Never give German armor a fair fight. Instead, use numbers, coordination, and speed to create local superiority, then exploit it without mercy. Here's how it worked in practice. A Sherman platoon spots a Tiger, or more likely, a Tiger spots them and destroys the lead Sherman. Instead of retreating or attempting to engage frontally, the remaining Shermans immediately split and maneuver. 2 Shermans suppress the Tiger with fire, not trying to penetrate its armor, just forcing the commander to button up and disrupting his targeting. Meanwhile, two more Shermans flank at high speed, using terrain for concealment, trying to get to the Tiger's vulnerable side or rear armor. The Tiger commander now faces an impossible problem. He can destroy one, maybe two Shermans, but while he's engaging them, the flanking elements are moving into killing positions. His advantage in armor and firepower is meaningless if he's taking fire from multiple directions simultaneously. His slow traverse speed, the Tiger's turret took a full minute to rotate 360 degrees by hand, becomes a fatal liability. By the time he's engaged one threat, another has reached his flank. Staff Sergeant Lafayette Poole perfected this technique to a lethal art. On September 19, 1944, near Stahlberg, Germany, Poole's Sherman, nicknamed In the Mood, encountered 3 Panthers and a Tiger defending a road junction. Poole didn't charge. He didn't retreat. He radioed his platoon and executed a textbook swarm. 2 Shermans engaged the German armor frontally, forcing them to focus forward. Poole and another Sherman circled through a wooded area, emerged on the German flank, and destroyed all 4 enemy tanks in rapid succession. Poole's crew alone accounted for 12 German tank kills that day. The technique required extraordinary crew coordination and nerves of steel. Imagine being in one of the suppressing Shermans, deliberately drawing fire from a Tiger, knowing that its 88mm gun could kill you with a single shot, trusting that your platoon mates would reach the flank before the Tiger turned its attention to you. Men died learning this tactic. Entire crews were incinerated when timing went wrong or terrain didn't provide enough concealment. But when it worked, when American crews executed the swarm perfectly, German armor died. And the psychological impact was profound. German tank commanders who'd grown accustomed to easy victories suddenly found themselves fighting for survival. They couldn't focus on one target without exposing themselves to others. They couldn't advance without risking encirclement. They couldn't retreat without exposing their thinner rear armor. At Aricourt in September 1944, the 4th Armored Division demonstrated the doctrine's full potential. German commanders committed the 5th Panzer Army to destroy American positions. Over 200 German tanks, including dozens of Panthers and Tigers. On paper, the Germans had overwhelming superiority. In practice, they suffered one of the most lopsided defeats in armored warfare history. American tank companies used swarm tactics, superior coordination, and aggressive maneuver to destroy German armor in detail. The battle lasted 10 days. When it ended, the Germans had lost over 200 tanks. American losses were minimal. The key was combined arms integration. American doctrine didn't rely solely on tank versus tank combat. Sherman platoons worked intimately with tank destroyers, the M10 and M18, which were faster and carried heavier guns. When Sherman swarmed a Tiger, tank destroyers positioned themselves in overwatch, ready to deliver killing shots from range. American artillery provided smoke screens for flanking maneuvers and high-explosive shells to suppress German infantry support. Infantry support was crucial. German tanks operating without infantry were vulnerable, and American doctrine exploited this ruthlessly. Sherman crews worked with infantry squads to locate German armor, identify blind spots, and coordinate attacks. Bazooka teams would pin German tanks from one direction while Shermans attacked from another. The Americans turned every engagement into a combined arms problem that German armor couldn't solve with superior technology alone. Air support multiplied the advantage. P-47 Thunderbolts and P-51 Mustangs worked directly with armored columns, providing reconnaissance and close air support. When German armor concentrated to counter a Sherman attack, American fighter bombers turned concentration into vulnerability. Pilots called it tank plinking, diving on exposed German armor with bombs and rockets. The Germans had no effective counter. Their air force was depleted, their fuel was scarce, and the Allies controlled the skies. By late 1944, the tactical evolution was complete. American armored divisions had transformed from a force taking catastrophic losses to one inflicting them. Sherman crews no longer feared Tigers. They hunted them. The mathematics had inverted. Yes, a Tiger could still kill 5 Shermans, but there were always 6 Shermans, and the 6th one would kill the Tiger. The Battle of the Bulge in December 1944 proved the doctrine under the worst possible conditions. German armored units attacked through the Ardennes with surprise and numerical superiority, initially overwhelming American positions. Weather grounded Allied aircraft. Fog limited visibility. The Germans committed their best remaining armor, including Tiger IIs, the even more formidable King Tiger with its 188mm gun. And the Americans stopped them cold. Not through superior technology, but through superior doctrine. Sherman crews that had spent 6 months perfecting swarm tactics didn't panic when confronted by King Tigers. They maneuvered. They coordinated. They called in tank destroyers and artillery. At Bastogne, American armor held critical road junctions against repeated German attacks. At St. Vith, Sherman companies fought delaying actions that bought time for reinforcements. When the weather cleared and American armor counterattacked, the results were devastating for Germany. The 2nd and 3rd Armored Divisions spearheaded drives that encircled German armor and destroyed it in detail. Creighton Abrams' 37th Tank Battalion broke through to relieve Bastogne, destroying everything in its path. The Germans had committed their last operational reserves and lost them. After the Bulge, Germany's armored force never recovered. The statistical reality was stark. In 1944, the U.S. Army produced over 20,000 Sherman tanks. Germany produced fewer than 1,400 tanks total, including all models. The Panther was technically superior to the Sherman. The Tiger was technically superior. But technical superiority was operationally meaningless when you couldn't replace losses and your enemy could. Every destroyed Tiger was irreplaceable. Every destroyed Sherman was replaced within hours. American doctrine exploited this advantage systematically. Armored divisions accepted tactical losses because they understood operational mathematics. If you needed to sacrifice 2 Shermans to destroy 1 Tiger, you made that trade, because you'd have 2 more Shermans tomorrow and the Germans would still be down 1 Tiger. The cold calculus of industrial war. By January 1945, German tank commanders who'd once laughed at Sherman numbers were writing desperate reports about facing endless American tank swarms. They described engagements where they destroy 5, 10, 15 Shermans, only to face 20 more the next day. They described crews exhausted from constant combat, tanks breaking down without spare parts, and fuel shortages that turned their technically superior armor into immobile pillboxes. The Sherman's versatility amplified the advantage. While Tigers and Panthers required specialized recovery equipment and extensive maintenance, Shermans could be repaired in field conditions with basic tools. Their engines were reliable. Their parts were interchangeable. Their crews could cannibalize destroyed hulks to keep other tanks running. In operational terms, this meant American armored divisions maintained combat effectiveness even while taking significant losses. The doctrine's impact extended beyond the Western Front. In Italy, American armor used similar tactics against German defensive positions in mountainous terrain. In the Pacific, Sherman crews adapted swarm tactics against Japanese bunkers and fortified positions. The principles, numerical superiority, coordination, combined arms integration, proved universal. Soviet forces independently developed similar doctrine on the Eastern Front. The T-34, like the Sherman, was individually inferior to German heavy tanks. But Soviet commanders massed T-34s in overwhelming numbers and attacked from multiple directions simultaneously. At Kursk and later engagements, German armor faced the same problem from the east that they faced from the west: technical superiority couldn't overcome coordinated numerical superiority. The Germans never effectively countered the doctrine. They tried. They positioned Tigers in mutually supporting positions. They integrated more infantry with their armor. They improved crew training. But they couldn't overcome the fundamental problem. They didn't have enough tanks, enough fuel, enough trained crews, or enough time. Every engagement depleted their operational strength, and there were no strategic reserves to replace losses. The Sherman versus Tiger story became one of World War II's most misunderstood narratives. Post-war histories focused on technical specifications and one-on-one comparisons. They concluded that the Sherman was inferior, and on paper, it was. What these histories missed was that wars aren't won on paper. They're won through doctrine, logistics, and operational art. The U.S. Army never intended the Sherman to fight Tigers in fair, one-on-one engagements. American doctrine assumed numerical superiority and designed tactics to exploit it. The Sherman was optimized for mass production, ease of maintenance, mechanical reliability, and crew survivability. These weren't sexy characteristics, but they were operationally decisive. A tank that could be built quickly, repaired easily, and kept multiple crews alive was worth more than a technically superior tank that took months to produce and couldn't be repaired in field conditions. German armor doctrine, by contrast, pursued technical perfection at the expense of operational practicality. The Tiger was a magnificent achievement in armor engineering, and a strategic disaster. It was too expensive, too complex, too slow to produce, and too difficult to maintain. German industry built fewer than 1,700 Tigers total during the entire war. American industry built over 49,000 Shermans. The Germans optimized for tactical superiority. The Americans optimized for operational dominance. This distinction matters for understanding armored warfare's evolution. The Sherman wasn't a bad tank. It was a tank designed for a specific operational doctrine that proved devastatingly effective. Its technical limitations were real, but they were acceptable within the doctrine that employed it. The Americans understood something crucial. In industrial war, the tank that's good enough and available in unlimited numbers defeats the technically perfect tank that's rare and irreplaceable. Modern armor doctrine still reflects lessons learned from Sherman crews in 1944. Contemporary tank tactics emphasize coordination, combined arms integration, and numerical superiority at the point of contact. No modern army plans to win through technical superiority alone. The principle of concentrating forces to achieve local superiority, even if you're inferior overall, remains fundamental to military operations at every level. The Sherman's true legacy isn't in its technical specifications. It's in proving that doctrine, training, and operational art can overcome technological disadvantage. That mass and coordination defeat perfection and isolation. That winning wars requires not just better weapons but better systems for employing those weapons effectively. Consider what American tankers accomplished. They took a tank that was objectively inferior to German heavy armor and turned it into the weapon that broke the Wehrmacht in Western Europe. They did this not by complaining about technical limitations, but by developing doctrine that made those limitations operationally irrelevant. They accepted tactical losses as the price of operational success, and they were right. The psychological reversal was profound. In June 1944, Sherman crews feared Tigers. By December 1944, Tiger crews feared Sherman swarms. The weapon hadn't changed. The armor hadn't improved. What changed was doctrine, training, and the confidence that came from knowing how to win. American tankers learned that 5 Shermans coordinating their attack could kill any German tank, and they had enough Shermans to make that math work everywhere simultaneously. Lafayette Poole's story captures the human dimension of this tactical evolution. Poole enlisted before Pearl Harbor and spent years training before he saw combat. When his Sherman landed in Normandy, he was terrified, honest about the fear that every tanker felt facing German armor. His early engagements were chaotic. He made mistakes. He saw friends die in burning Shermans. But Poole survived, and survival meant learning. He paid attention to what worked and what didn't. He experimented with tactics. He trained his crew obsessively on gunnery and coordination. By August 1944, Poole's Sherman, in the mood, was one of the most lethal weapons in the European theater. Poole's confirmed kills eventually exceeded 250 enemy vehicles, including multiple Tigers and Panthers. What made Poole exceptional wasn't superhuman courage or technical skill. It was his understanding that survival required thinking differently. He never fought fair. He never gave German armor a one-on-one engagement. He used terrain, speed, and coordination to create advantages, and he killed German tanks with ruthless efficiency. His crew trusted him absolutely because Poole kept them alive while destroying the enemy. Poole's luck ran out on September 19, 1944, the same day he destroyed 12 German tanks. German artillery caught in the mood in the open. Poole survived with severe injuries, losing a leg. He was evacuated to England, recovered, and requested to return to combat. The army refused. Poole had already done enough. He'd proven that Sherman crews could win, and he'd trained dozens of other crews in the tactics that worked. Other tankers had similar stories of evolution under fire. Sergeant William McBriar started the war as a loader, the lowest-ranking crew position. He learned gunnery by watching his tank commander. When his commander was killed at St. Lo, McBriar took over the tank and led his crew through the rest of the campaign. He survived 6 tanks destroyed under him, walking away from burning Shermans that should have killed him. McBriar described the terror of facing Tigers. You'd hear that 88 fire and you knew someone was about to die. The sound was distinctive. Then you'd see a Sherman explode and you'd pray it wasn't yours. But he also described learning to fight back. We figured out that if we hit them from 3 directions at once, they couldn't get us all. Someone was going to die, but the Tiger was definitely going to die. Once we understood that, we stopped being afraid. The human cost was never abstract. Tank crews were 5 men who lived together, fought together, and often died together in burning steel. They knew each other's families, fears, and dreams. When a Sherman took a penetrating hit, the survivors had seconds to escape, and many didn't make it. The crews who pulled their wounded friends from burning tanks, who fought fires with extinguishers while ammunition cooked off inside, who kept fighting after watching their friends die, these men earned every bit of recognition they received. Crew cohesion was survival. A Sherman crew that trained together and fought together developed almost telepathic coordination. The loader knew when the gunner would fire. The driver anticipated the commander's orders. The assistant driver gunner watched flanks without being told. This cohesion was what made swarm tactics possible. 5 men in 4 different Shermans operating as a single organism, coordinating attacks without radio communication because they knew the doctrine so well. The Germans respected this, even while they lost to it. Captured German tank commanders described their surprise at American tactical sophistication. They'd expected numerical superiority but not tactical flexibility. One Tiger commander captured at Aracourt reported, "We thought we could destroy them faster than they could bring up reserves. We were wrong. They just kept coming, and they coordinated better than we did. By the 3rd day, we were afraid." The hedgerows of Normandy are quiet now, overgrown with decades of peace. The tank battles that raged there exist only in memory and history. But the lessons endure, written in the doctrine of every modern army and in the understanding that wars are won not by the best weapons but by the best systems for employing weapons effectively. The Sherman crews of 1944 did something remarkable. They took an inferior weapon and turned it into an instrument of victory through doctrine, training, and extraordinary courage. They paid a terrible price. Thousands of tankers died in burning Shermans, and their sacrifice should never be minimized. But they also proved something fundamental about warfare, that thinking, adapting, and fighting smart defeats technological superiority every time. The story matters because it challenges comfortable assumptions. It's easy to look at technical specifications and declare winners and losers. It's harder to understand how doctrine, logistics, and operational art determine actual outcomes. The Germans built better tanks. The Americans built better tank forces. In industrial war, the latter matters more than the former. Every Sherman crew that rolled into combat in 1944 understood the odds. They knew their tanks were outgunned and underarmored. They knew German crews could kill them from ranges where they couldn't fight back. And they fought anyway, because they also knew that American doctrine gave them a way to win. They knew that 5 Shermans working together could kill any German tank. They knew that their sacrifice, if it came, would be part of a larger victory. That knowledge, that even inferior weapons can prevail through superior employment, remains relevant. Modern militaries still face situations where potential adversaries possess superior technology in specific domains. The lesson from 1944 is that this doesn't determine outcomes. What determines outcomes is doctrine, training, coordination, and the willingness to adapt under fire. The German panzer crews who laughed at Sherman numbers in June 1944 weren't laughing by December. They were reporting endless American tank swarms that they couldn't stop. They were watching their technically superior armor get destroyed by coordinated attacks from multiple directions. They were learning what American tankers had already proven, that in war, perfect can be the enemy of good enough, and good enough in overwhelming numbers with superior doctrine wins every time. The Shermans that fought across Europe weren't perfect. They were simply good enough, available in unlimited quantities, employed with evolving doctrine that exploited their advantages, and crewed by men who learned to win despite technical disadvantages. That combination proved unbeatable, and the Tiger crews who survived learned to fear it. This is what American tankers accomplished in World War II. They took a weapon their enemies mocked, developed tactics that turned weakness into strength, and used it to help destroy the most powerful military machine in history. They earned their place in history not through technological superiority but through courage, adaptability, and the cold-blooded willingness to accept tactical losses in service of operational victory. Their story deserves to be remembered not as a tale of inferior equipment but as a testament to what doctrine and determination can achieve against any odds.